Hi everyone, I am Chirag Thakkar, commissioning editor at Roli Books, and you're watching Roli Pulse, our new digital initiative. Since the lockdown in India began, we have brought you your favorite writers on your screens through our panel discussions and book talks. And one such series that we've been curating is Publishing Perspectives, where we bring together our peers from the publishing world for an exchange and cross pollination of ideas. Remember, you can check out all our previous sessions on our YouTube channel, Roli Books, so please subscribe to it, our IGTV on Instagram, as well as on Facebook and Twitter. And if you want us to put out more such content, then show us your love. Type in your comments in the comment section below and share this with your friends and peers and anyone you wish to. This is the fourth episode of Publishing Perspective, and today's conversation is on new directions in book adaptations for screen. And I'm very pleased to welcome our speakers for today, Adrian Levy, Sidharth Jain, Anuja Chauhan, Priya Kapoor, and Ankur Pathak. Adrian Levy is an award-winning writer and producer. He has formerly been with the Sunday Times and The Guardian. Adrian has produced award-winning documentaries for HBO, PBS, BBC One and Two, C4, Facebook, and Vice TV. He's co-authored several books with Catherine Scott Clark and has most recently written the book Exile, a kitchen sink drama for Bin Laden's life on the run. His book, The Meadow, published in 2012, won the Ramnath Goenka Award for Excellence in Journalism. We have with us Sidharth Jain, who founded India's first story company, The Story Inc., a book-to-screen venture. He's worked at Hotstar India as the creative head for original and licensed content and at Ad Labs. He's been involved with films such as Marigold and Ragini MMS. Sidharth speaks at multiple forums in a year, including the TEDx, and hosts a monthly talk series at Soho House, Bombay. Anuja Chauhan is in the house. She is the author of 5 best-selling novels such as The Zoya Factor, Battle for Bitora, among others. She also works in advertising, where she is best known for her work on campaigns such as Ye Dil Mange More, Mera Number Kab Aayega, Oi Bubbly, Kurkure Tera Hai Par Mera Hai, among others. Her most recent advertising campaign has been for the Congress Party's Ab Hoga Nyay campaign in the 2019 general elections. All her books have been adapted for movies or web series. The Zoya Factor by Foxstar, Battle for Bitora by the Anil Kapoor Film Company, Those Pricey Thakur Girls by the Z Network as well as Hotstar, and Bars by Yashraj Films. She writes a fortnightly column for The Week magazine titled Schizo Nation. We're joined by my colleague, the ever-cheerful Priya Kapoor, who began her career in journalism with the Indian Express. She then worked at Routledge in London for 2 years before joining Roli Books about 15 years ago. In her time at Roli, she's commissioned and edited both mass market books and critically acclaimed books such as Dongri to Dubai and Taj Mahal Foxtrot. She is also the co-founder and director of CMYK, India's first dedicated bookshop for art and illustrated books. Adrian, Anuja, Sidharth, and Priya are going to be in conversation with Ankur Pathak. Ankur is a dear friend, currently entertainment editor and film critic at HuffPost India. He reports on the Hindi film industry with a focus on investigations into sexual harassment and assault prevalent very much in the industry. Ankur has previously worked for Mumbai Mirror and has written for People, The Wall Street Journal, and Reader.com. He hosts the show AK Talkies at Soho House, Bombay. So welcome to this very exciting chat, all of you. I'll just have Ankur get us started and dive straight into the discussion.
I feel like woefully inadequate right now after listening to those descriptions of the very esteemed panel. So welcome everybody to Rudi Pulse, which is the new initiative by Roli Books. I am a big fan of the publishing house, and because of Chirag, I keep getting all the interesting details about what they're working on. So let's just quickly dive in. This is very exciting because usually you have a panel in front of a live audience in an actual physical venue. But well, this is how we communicate and live now. So that is very exciting. I want to begin with Priya, and I wanted to understand, I was just reading about like how publishing is taking a big hit as a result of the pandemic. And one narrative that emerges is the regional language publishing houses, which are taking like the biggest brunt, so to speak. And then there is, of course, the English language publishing house. Now, we obviously know because of the bookstores shutting down, there are no sales happening. And as a result, like your revenue is directly hit. But the next question, I believe, which is logical to ask is, do you think this is finally the moment of reckoning for publishers to look at online sales or Kindle editions or digital versions of books as the primary source and not your hardcovers?
That's a good question. I mean, there's no doubt that in the last 3 months, we, across the board, I would say, publishers of all scale and size have seen definitely an increase in ebook sales. There have been a lot of new users who would otherwise have not taken to reading digitally or on a device. But because of not being able to get physical books, they are now having to force to change their habits. Having said that, I don't believe that once things go back to being able to order and buy books, that we will see ebooks taking over physical books. I've seen that in the past, even when there was this big talk and big fad about ebooks taking over, it kind of balanced out, equalized, and physical books started taking over ebook sales as well. What will change, however, of course, is that you will have more users who've taken this time to adapt and to change their reading habits. For us as publishers, it's not so much about the form in which you read. It's about what we publish and how we're able to get it out to readers. Whether it's as an ebook, almost all our books that we publish, except for, of course, the large format art books, are available as ebooks simultaneously as we publish our paperbacks and our hardbacks. So that's a practice that's always been around. In terms of being as publishers, there's no doubt that there's some very, large, big existential questions that we've had to ask ourselves during this time. Like, what is our role if we are not able to basically be that medium for our authors to publish through and for readers to get the book? How do we stay relevant? How do our authors stay relevant? How do stories still get out there? And that's something for me personally has been in the coming, in the last I would say in the last year, as new avenues have opened up for our books to be adapted. There's definitely been a question that we've asked ourselves: how do we get a piece of that pie, but how do we also be more nimble and adapt our ways to be able to work with these platforms more closely, to get our authors a bigger platform as well. And this time has definitely helped us to put certain ideas in motion. Our digital initiative just being a small way to get it out there, but also thinking about the kind of partnerships that we would like to make going forward. And which is why for me, it's very exciting to have somebody like Adrian on this panel, because we have been working on a book together for the last almost 6-7 months, where his company has bought the rights, has optioned the rights for a book. And it's been a great learning experience. And it's also been very exciting as a publisher, which is quite traditional, to be honest. I mean, we were focusing on the printed format, on the physical book.
Adrian and Anuja, I quickly want to hear from you. As writers, we tend to romanticize the very nature of the paperback, right? And rightly so, because it just still is a very different experience. Even me as a millennial who's 27, I still prefer reading the hardcover because you want to smell the paper and it's just a very different experience. But as our lives get more and more automated, have you as writers been able to shift that perspective personally, or there is still some sort of a nostalgia to the way things work? Adrian, you want to go first?
I sort of see books and music as part of the architecture of where you live. So for me to have that stuff around me and to be in all of my rooms, wherever I am, for there to be reading matter and listening matter, whether that is vinyl or, analog, in every analog form, books, magazines. I like that world. I like people to come into that world, and I like to enter into other people's creative spaces too. And for that reason, I can never see that actually sublimating into the cloud. I think people like to have the stuff that is them and is their memories all around them. The bookshelf will always be there for that very reason. Photography will be there. We may have scrolling feeds with Android and iOS. But how we represent our pictures as on our screens and on our phones, that stuff we carry with us. It's our mementos, and reading is the same, and movies and music is the same. Vinyl sales have gone through the roof in Europe. It's interesting how people are going back to that, and yet they're feeding their vinyl through digital media, through MIDI systems. So they're manipulating their vinyl through their MacBooks and through their Windows computers. And so I think there's rather than us seeing one form being extinct. I think it's the marrying of forms together. And that's also true in terms of, how we write, how we perceive ideas. An idea is 360. An idea is the audio. An idea is the smell, the sense of the idea. It's the writing itself. It's the film. It's the podcast. It's every dimension now, and that's thrilling. Totally thrilling. It's not overwhelming. It's an opportunity.
Sort of to also cross-promote your work through different mediums, and as a result, you reach more listeners, viewers, readers. Anuja, any thoughts on this, on sort of the nostalgia of the past?
No, I mean, see, I love books as a reader. I mean, to your question, I would only react as a reader that I love to read a book. Like when you read a book, you made a commitment to that book. You have put away many other things to get that. Even if you're reading off a Kindle, you always have the option of other books. So as a writer, I'm most flattered when someone reads like a hard copy, because that means you are giving me single-minded attention, and that's really cool. And of course, everything Adrian said. I mean, for me, my books are part of my decor. I mean, they're part of my home. It's part of like the cave, like a most inner sanctum, has lots of books in them. And it's just that it's like playing on a piano and playing on a really fancy synthesizer or a keyboard. Like a piano is a piano. So I think that will always be there. And I would feel most flattered if somebody read a paperback.
So yeah, like we're very sure where your loyalties lie at this point, at least. So that is great. Sid, I wanted to ask you, and like Priya, maybe you can also chip in here about, with the sort of emergence of streaming studios, there has been like so much of content that gets produced almost on an industrial level, right? And like anything that gets mass produced will kind of take a hit at the quality of it. But I wanted to understand, has that rise in sort of production been proportionate to more and more books getting adapted for screens, or there is like a lag there?
No, I think also what happens in our business, in the media business, is that there's a process of development called development hell, right?
Yeah.
And like earlier, I would notice that mostly there would be original stories and very few books, like Anuja's books, and popular authors' books would sort of just get the attention of the development producers, and they would start the process, and taking them, converting into a project. In the last 2 years, when I started the Story Inc., my goal was, I thought, I'll set up 8-10 books in a year, and then, I'll go back to producing. But, it's been 2 years. I just finished 2 years in April. We finished 100 books. So 100 books are in the process of development, which is a huge growth as opposed to what the industry was before the streaming company. Obviously, all won't get made. Some options will expire, some options will get exercised. But what's happened is that the larger consciousness has come in that in production houses that we need to find stories. We need to find stories that will help us deliver a content strategy faster, because the growth is exponential in streaming.
Yeah.
Not so much in television and films, but it's all being fueled by the streaming companies trying to want more. So it's a natural progression towards that, that sort of world of development. Production will only grow that much because there are only limited number of filmmakers and directors and showrunners in the business. So now the producers, if they want a certain director, showrunner, what they have as a tool is not only money, but also, what, I've got great material that I have access to. And this material is the reason why you should junk that project and come to me. So I think the development has increased. Production is trying to catch up, but I think it'll take some time. But we're already in that path. I think it's a great cycle.
So the process is kind of underway. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, in my opinion, it's sort of really, it's on a very high growth curve.
Priya, would you say, has this helped in sort of like, subsidizing your expenses as a publisher, or has that become like a reliable source of revenue, like optioning books for Netflix, Amazon, Hotstar, or one of those platforms?
I'll be honest, I'll say that in the last 18 months, we started to look at it as a very formidable revenue stream. Prior to that, it used to be a bonus if a book was optioned. It was not really something that you base the book's revenues on or the success of a book. But now, there was a time, I would say 18 months ago, where literally every week we would be getting a call or an email or a message through somebody saying that we want to go through your catalog and so on. Of course, very little of that gets converted into actual, beyond just interest and wanting to know what you have. But the few successes that we've had, it's been fantastic for our writers. I mean, the publishers get a small percentage of it, so I wouldn't really say that it's something that's overtaken or is going to take care of our expenses. But yes, it's a strong enough revenue stream for us to take it very seriously, because more than anything, it brings the attention back to the book and to the writer. And there's been more than enough instances to know that, and as Sidharth just said, that it's not just about like books and authors which were already bestsellers and popular names. I'm talking about deep into our backlist. Books which were published almost 15 years ago and are there. They exist. We continue to reprint them and keep them alive. However, it's been a pleasant surprise for us as well that they've been found and they've been optioned and they've been given a new lease of life almost. If and when the movie or the web series does come out, it brings the attention back to the book, and that's very exciting because publishing does have its limitations on how much marketing you can do for a book. But something like if it's adapted into to either a web series or a film, you're basically propelled into another realm altogether. I mean, I'll never forget that Priya, who's a very dear friend of mine, and his first novel that was sort of picked up and made it into a web series. It was so exciting for me to see hoardings in Bombay, of his book, saying that this is a web series coming out. I mean, that's a dream come true for any first-time novelist, isn't it? That you see your book out there on a hoarding. Like, no publisher would be able to afford something like that on the basis of book sales. So as a publisher, it's been very exciting. I mean, revenue aside, it's also been supremely exciting to see book stories and authors being put in the forefront and getting the kind of view that they should have gotten.
Absolutely, yeah. Adrian and Anuja, I wanted to sort of bring you all in about, the very sort of nature of collaboration, because like as is the difference between literature and a movie, like books are so author oriented, right? It's just you writing it and probably collaborating with an editor versus a movie which would have like many different voices and streams coming together. Anuja, you've had like your movie being adapted, Zoya Factor, which came out recently. Tell me, how do you sort of negotiate the space of retaining the spirit and essence of your writing, which is on one hand, and like this sort of Bollywoodization that we see in popular culture? Like, is there a conflict there, or are you able to like reconcile with that quite easily?
Like, I don't think I've had a good experience either time. The Pricey Thakur Girls was made into a very strange show called Dilli Wali Thakur Girls, and then the Zoya Factor was made last year, and neither of them are experiences that have, been like that have been fantastic. So I don't think it's possible. I really don't think it's possible. I think you write a book, you can have, see, the reason why I stopped working in advertising and I started writing novels full time was exactly for this, because the goal is always creative control, right? You're like this complete control freak, and you want to just micromanage everything and have that, I mean, like everyone is so OCD and like I want to be in charge of everything, which you can only achieve if you're a novelist or if you're a painter and you're physically doing stuff yourself, right? Anything else, other people come in, and there's the big fat C word, which is collaboration. And then you have lots of people in the room and everyone has an opinion and everyone has got their own agenda going on. And then it's whatever the hell it is. I mean, if you look at Agatha, what would Agatha Christie say if she saw Murder on the Orient Express, what they put out last year? What was that Poirot? Why did he have so much hair? Why was he running up and down and being so energetic? He wasn't just sitting quietly and like thinking things out of his little gray cells. They just do anything they like. And so I'm just saying that it yes, of course, as Priya pointed out, your name, there'll be a hoarding with your name on it. Lots more people will see it. You'll get a lot of respect when you go out and socialize at parties. People will say, her book, she writes books. It's like, yeah, okay, she writes books which got made into a movie. Oh my God, so there is that, and it's great. I love it. I'm vain enough to love that. I spend my life in a writing cave. When I go out there, I like being feted and have people say, look, here she is. So I'm saying it does give you those little joys. But as a creative, like, something that adds to your creative portfolio, gives you like, joys of putting something out there, I don't think there's anything as pure as writing the novel. And what I really worry about is that people shouldn't start writing books thinking that I'll write this and then it'll get acquired by Netflix and then it'll be amazing. Because that that's terrible. That is tainting your medium. And that's exactly why I got of advertising, because I was writing, but it was applied art and it was all tainted. And that's what I do worry a little bit. So for me, it would be much more exciting just to grow people who read rather than, go out and do like a can dance before people who watch movies.
Adrian, is it different for you? I mean, you've mostly dabbled in nonfiction, and because there is a factual narrative happening there, do you feel that there is more sort of purity in which the filmmakers treat your source material? And you've also been producer, so that gives you slightly more creative autonomy.
Yeah, it's really interesting to hear Anuja, and I get where she's coming from totally, but I kind of have gone through a sea change where I'm really super engaged in collaboration. Sometimes it doesn't go your way. I remember we wrote a book a long time ago called The Amber Room, which was about a room carved of amber that the Nazis stole, and it became this big mystery, who stole the room. And we went to see an American studio, and we sat down with an exec, and this is pre-streaming, and the exec said, "It's terrific, it's just terrific. This was on about our 9th breakfast. It's terrific. And what happens if the room is a portal?" And just go with me here. Like, if the room is a portal, and like when you step into it, you're transported through time. And at the time, I laughed my way out of that hotel room, thinking this is exactly why I don't want to get involved in the traditional studio system. And then that producer made Stargate about a year later, which was like this sort of phenomenal success, both as a movie and then as a series. But I still couldn't live with the fact that our book, The Amber Room, would have become Stargate. That's not where we were heading with it. But streaming has changed some things for the better and some things for the worse. The collaborative aspects are better in that there is a great creative discussion. There are weak points and fractures, which is that writing has to be elevated. And in the old Bollywood system, writing tended to be at the bottom of the pit. And, the director is rules and the writer is the serf, and now we have to reach this point whereby, like in the American system with a show like Succession, or any of these really great writerly shows, where you're elevating the writer, and like the writer becomes really important. If we can elevate the writer and we can bring together collaborative values and not take the old hackneyed approach, like I think writing schools in South Asia for a long time have been Ponzi schemes where, they induct people into entirely the wrong thinking about what writing should be. So writing is one break. And the second thing is politics is another break. So streaming platforms control the majority of our entry point, our portal into this world. And they're very conservative. They're massively conservative. They don't want to rock the present administration, the dispensation. They're very worried about politics. And so they're killing loads of projects. And the commissioning window is very, very tiny. It is narrowed in terms of the objectives. And a lot of films that were made when Netflix first started would not be commissioned by Netflix now. And the same would be true of Amazon. And not only that, but because their financing, and this is an important point, comes from comes from subscription basis, they're very worried about authoritarian governments and upsetting them. And the result of that is, if you see how they kowtow to the Saudis, and if I can say this, how they've been extremely worried about the South Asian environment, that's affected their commissioning too. So when you're thinking about that, what will be pulled through into the Netflix platform, politics will come into that, writing will come into that, collaboration. The plus side is that non-fiction and documentary is finding new, is really at a height, whether it's at the trash end like Tiger King, which everyone loves, the whole Carol Baskin meme, or, it's, the post kind of active killing, Look of Silence world, Cartel Land, where we're enjoying this massive revival of epic narrative storytelling. So that side is good. Can we elevate writing and deal with politics of commissioning? I hope so. They're things that need to be fixed.
Sid, I wanted to bring you in because you're sort of like the social lubricant between like publishing and like the streaming studios and the production companies. Would And now we're seeing a culture of like, Netflix and Amazon employing a writer's room, where unless, your script is completely tight, you would not take it on floors. But what Adrian is pointing out to is just this cautiousness as we see like, majoritarian politics taking over outside. Do you feel that there is a sense where you have to be cautious about what books you option or what books you bring into the sort of the elder gods at Netflix and Amazon?
See, caution is always, important in what we do, because there is so much of there is, politics. Also, there's so much of self-censorship. There is so much of, there are trends, there are opinions, and everybody has a view. So, what Adrian is saying is kind of, we always have to be cognizant of the fact that, we will be prone to all of these things. And, that's part of the business. It's always been like that. I don't think it's increased or decreased. I think it's always been there. It's all about how to navigate, these opportunities. But, at the end, somebody's paying money for it and somebody's making a lot of money. The value chain is shifting and writers and directors are making more money than they ever could. So it's a great time for storytellers to take advantage of this, and they are sort of working around it.
I want to ask you, when streaming came in, like the whole idea was that you're liberated from the shackles of morality and censorship, and you are having like this long form storytelling process, which was a counter to your traditional Bollywood narratives, which have always appeased to a popular sentiment, and they still continue to make propaganda films or,
that will remain for some time, because see, ultimately all the streaming platforms in the country want mass audiences. Every large OTT platform wants to beat the TV audience in terms of numbers. So it's always, that's what they all want, and they'll always be victim to that. It's, if there's big money, it needs big audiences. If there are big audiences, you have to work around those pitfalls, and there's no way out. Nobody wants to be a niche player. And you have to, be very, very cautious in what you do, because it could affect your business. I don't see that changing too soon.
And when you sort of bring a project, when you bring a book to a streaming platform, you're not just bringing the novel, you're selling a project essentially, right? You're selling a vision of what it can be. Do you have to kind of, again, reverse engineer your way as to, this will get those many clicks, because now we know exactly how many people are watching what, when are they pausing it?
Yeah.
But doesn't that defeat the purpose of having like, a new sort of medium that is more conducive to storytelling than other platforms?
No, so yes, I think it's a combination, right? Just as, art house films existed with commercial films, right? In India and across the world, there are two industries. I think what we'll see going forward on streaming platforms, some films will get made for art, but a lot of other films or shows will probably get made for commerce. And it's the balance. And what I do really is I work with the larger production houses and filmmakers in helping also figure what they want to do, what is their strategy, what are they passionate about, what stories they want to tell, right? So if your friend Anurag Kashyap wants to tell a certain story in a certain way, then we'll have to pick stories accordingly. So it's not one person trying to make something. Like Anuja said, right? It's a system, and everybody has a view, everybody has an agenda, and ultimately it's like a committee. It's exactly like the television business. If you see most OTT players in the US and India, almost all of their employees are from television. So it's sort of television getting more expensive per episode. Yeah. And ultimately we are trying to, and they want to reach the same audience.
But Sid, the core difference I just want to point out is that like US and UK already had like a television culture which wasn't your
absolutely
for us. You had your Sopranos and The Wire and Mad Men.
Yeah.
So plucking people. So if Netflix wants to be another HBO, then it is in tandem with what they've already doing.
Right.
This is here when
that's the issue,
so
right?
I'm confident.
Sorry, Adrian, you were saying?
That's the issue. That's the issue. I think elevating writing. I want to come back to that again. I've been in and out of a lot of writers' rooms, and I think finding that vernacular, finding the tight style. If you look at the shows that work, and you look at the quality of the writing, quite often the writing is still being left behind. It's a poor third player to the cinematography, for example, and the cinematography is elevated above the level of writing, and that's totally wrong. And it's moving in the counterintuitive way to the way that let's say, smart European TV is moving, like Scandinavian TV, French TV, really good shows in Germany that are coming out, like The Dark, are predicated by the writing. I just was watching, I think is it called Ordinary People? The Sally Rooney novel's been adapted. Normal People. It's just beautiful, right? And the reason I think it's beautiful, I watched a couple of episodes last night, is that it's a beautiful visualization of a book, which is uniquely written by a very young writer, and maybe should not have succeeded and succeeded against her own expectation, but the writing is tip top. Like, the writing is crisp and smart, and there can performances to go alongside that. And I think we should all be focusing on that element, increasing the professionalization and the status of the writers. More power to the writers' room, more collaboration in the writers' room. You know, and that may see us through. That may see us through. Otherwise, we'll end up with a lot of super complicated plotting and beautiful visuals and no common sense in what's streaming whatsoever. And there are good examples of that right now. Shows that are going out where they're let down by calamitous writing.
Yeah, Big Little Lies was another sort of, the first season was an example of something that elevated the book to another level.
So I must add something, Ankur, if I can. You know, the thing is, a large focus on writers' room and writing in India started last year. And I think the shows that we'll see from 21 onwards will start reflecting that. So what we're seeing now was commissioned in 19 and like 18, and, you know, when the revolution was just on the cusp. But I think the change that I've seen in the last 9 months has been terrific. And I think the results of those 9 months we'll get to see 21, you know, and 22. And I think those shows, the writing will be way better than what we've seen in this country. The collaborative efforts of writers' room will pay dividends. Definitely better. It'll be a move ahead. You know, it'll be progress for sure. And, you know, money is going there. And thanks to Netflix and Amazon, they're really pushing the bar. They are saying, write, rewrite, write, rewrite. And that's very important. Especially they're saying, let's pay the writers to write. Leave everything else. Just write for a living.
Yeah.
And that was never the thing in this country. In India, it was never that, you know, you can make a living by writing. And I think, you know, we're reaching that stage thanks to these OTT companies.
I was just going to add to that and say that it's been, I completely agree with what Adrian and Sidharth are saying, because it's been reflected in our experience as when we're negotiating a contract, for example. When right at the beginning, when we would be negotiating with production houses, it was almost as if they didn't want the authors to be a part of any of the process, right? Because it would mean that they would have to negotiate and sort of cajole them, and, you know, if they wanted to take creative liberties, it would make it that much harder. But now, not only are they more amiable and open, they ask for it. They actually want them to be a part of that process, and there's a separate writing fee for them or a consultant's fee for them for doing that. And I think that's absolutely a win-win situation across the board. I mean, wouldn't that be fantastic if you could have the author's vision to match the commitment or passion that the production house is bringing? And when I'm talking about non-fiction specifically, you've got all this research and, you know, all the background notes, etc., that didn't make it into the book, but will only enhance the final writing or the script that comes out of it. So that's definitely been reflected in the process that I've seen as far as contracts and negotiating go as well.
Anuja, you were talking about being really disappointed with, or at least it being a unsatisfactory experience in terms of, you know.
No, you know, I've had two of these. Two things have already come out. There's a bunch of other things which are being adapted. And as Priya says, I have all that. I have the writing fee and the consultants, whatever, and a certain amount of small soft power in what they actually do. But the point is that at the end of the day, somebody has to lead. And a movie or a show there needs to be somebody leading them. And even when we talk about the streaming platforms, the point is there needs to be one person taking all the calls. And I don't even think that within even the platforms you mentioned, like a Netflix or an Amazon, any of the big studios out there that produce films, that there is that one person. There is no one person who's taking the calls. It's always a committee. Then there is some research. Then the marketing people will come in and they'll say, you know what, you're pitching this all wrong. This show is actually about this. This show is actually about that. It's a complete... So it's not like anybody has clarity. Everyone is trying to guess what is the next trend and sort of ride with that, So unless your idea is like very, very core and you're very, very clear about it. Like, for example, if you take a movie like Dirty Dancing, what is Dirty Dancing? It's actually a book that says legalize abortion. That is actually what Dirty Dancing is about. You take away everything. What is it? There's this girl and she goes and there is someone who does a hatchet job on her and therefore she's too unwell to dance and this other girl comes and dances. That is the writer's hidden agenda in that thing, And today what people do is that they'll go and then say, everything else is fine, but take that abortion out. Just make it that her grandmother was ill and so she went to meet the grandmother so she couldn't dance because all that the audience will not take. And somewhere you have ripped out the heart of that movie, made it about something else. And that is the kind of thing they do on a daily basis. And that is not good for the writing community, for literature, for any sort of creativity. And that is what happens all the time. And so, I'm sorry if I sound a little cynical, but that is, and it's nice. The writers' rooms are lovely. They order great food and we go to lovely restaurants, sit around, they put you up in a fancy hotel. But what is the point at the end of the day? You might as well have sat in your cave and got your little royalty and written something pure. And honestly, I'm very happy when people auction my books and I'm very unhappy when they actually act on them. I'd rather they really came up and just leave it like that. Maybe that's actually how I feel.
Anuja, what you in this scenario, there's obviously a sort of a creative blind spot that you're dealing with, and you obviously want your books to get adapted and become like these really amazing series. So what do you see as the way ahead? Like, what do you do in this case? How do you be more in charge?
No, I don't think you can be in charge of a movie. Nobody except a director, if they are a well-respected director with a good track record, can really be in charge. I watch these interviews with people like Javed Saab or Rishi Kapoor or anybody, and they always say that this really good picture happened to us by accident. There's no science to it. There really seems to be none. If they talk about a Sholay or they talk about a Cards, they always say that it just happened, man. There was good energy in the room. Or there was something, we got kissed by Saraswati. Something happened. It's the same thing that's happened in advertising with me. Certain ads have been brilliant and certain ads have been total fails. And I think beyond the point, it is an unscientific kind of intuitive process. And sometimes, you're a band that makes amazing music and then the band breaks up because that golden period is out, even if you're talking about music or anything. So I think that we should just focus on trying to create those golden periods and trying to do that and being true creatively rather than making this more and more of a science, because the more scientific you make it, the more crap you're going to make it.
I remember John le Carre saying that he had a love, leave and forget attitude. So he'd write a book because he wanted to write it. And then, these people would come and they'd say, we'll make a tremendous movie with your book. And he'd just say, how much are you paying? Yeah. And then they'd pay the money. And then he'd say, go away. And then basically, after 10 years, the book would be optioned another 3 times. It would never be made, and he was banking the money all the way through. But the thing is, things have changed since then. Okay. One thing that's changed, his children moved into production. And now his children own the production company that produces his books. And so the last 3, one of which was directed by that amazing Korean director, was actually produced by his children, who've raised the quality bar massively. That's the first thing that happened. The second thing is that the process of moving from writing to production has accelerated because of streaming platforms, rather than the old movie method of multiply stacking scripts and screenplays. And so the timing adds another dimension to it. And therefore, as a writer, you can be more demanding. You can be. I wonder whether it's any longer true with a great writer's room and a director, whether or not you'll just be bushwhacked all the time. I think you can afford to be more demanding. You can afford to be more of the activist.
No, but Adrian, I have a life. I have a life. I have a new book to write.
Anuja, what are your children doing? Maybe they need to start a production house.
Yeah, I trust them.
But Priya and Sid, is there any way in, like, you guys, from a publishing perspective, is there any way that you can empower the writer in a way that, his or her work doesn't get completely massacred and it's mortifying to look at? On the other hand, you would want it to be elevated. I think Sacred Games, the first season, did a fairly good job in capturing what the book did. But there have been many adaptations since, with Netflix has done, like Selection Day by Adiga. And even I think with Prayag's book, the show didn't quite live up to the book standards. Is there a way there that you can fix this from the back end?
I'll be very honest with you. I think it's something that we prepare our authors for when they're actually getting into an option agreement, that there will be production houses who will be happy to have you on board. There'll be others who'll say, listen, I don't even know when we're going to take it forward, how we're taking it forward, whether it's a 2-season, show or it's a 6-part series. All of those decisions are no longer in the hands of the publisher or the writer. And some writers are absolutely fine. As Adrian said, they get that large chunk of money and they're happy to move on to the next book. And that's what they do, because essentially that's what they do. They write books and everything else is a bonus, There are others who are definitely, especially, and it also depends on the nature of the book. If it's somebody's memoir, for example, if we're talking about, or a biography that they've written, spend years and years gaining the trust of the subject, that becomes more tricky. And that's when I think, you can definitely try and negotiate your sensitivity into the contract. And that's where it's important as a publisher who sort of, whose responsibility is to match the right production house or the right people who are optioning the right, to make sure that it's not always driven by money. And it's not always driven by money, to be honest. If somebody is saying to you that we want to take the biography of this great musician, a female musician, but we're going to add a romantic angle and we're going to add this because this is what we need to do. We've actually walked away from something like that because it didn't work. It didn't sound suitable to the writer. It didn't sound good. Yeah, exactly. So I think it differs. But having said that, as a publisher, you cannot actually dictate to the production house when signing the contract that, listen, we're going to have creative liberties over this. It's like somebody coming to me and saying that we're going to have creative liberties over the cover that you're going to do. That's not how it works. But you need to be prepared before you get in so that there are no surprises later on. And if it doesn't work for you and the writer, you just, you wait till it does and you move on to the next.
Find the right partner to.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's important to understand the process, right? Every screenplay, before it becomes a screenplay, is a story stage before that. Whether it's a 300-page book or it's a 20-page story treatment or a 40-page story, right? There is a process that one needs to sort of go through, but to turn into a screenplay. And, recently, this author, a friend of mine, he learned how to write screenplays a few years ago, and he's been sort of trying to navigate that path. And he sort of has started writing very good screenplays. In fact, he's written a screenplay for a very big director for that guy's story. And now when his book is being optioned, because he's also good at screenplay writing, he's getting a shot at writing the screenplay. Also, it's not for a series, because series usually, the volume and the length, you need more writers. It's a film. So if it's a feature film and if the author has figured out the art of writing a screenplay, he's willing to collaborate with the director, I think there is some way one can sort of, bridge that. But otherwise, it's business and it's a process. And, whoever is going to be responsible. So a filmmaker is usually responsible for the film, right? For a series as a showrunner or a series director. So these guys will really drive the decisions because that's their job. And there will be, that gap. And it's, I think we need to, it's not that easy to bridge that gap. There will be. And as Priya said, be mentally prepared for it. And like Anuja said, I've seen Zoya Factor, the film, and I've seen, I know her book. And I can imagine what she's feeling because, so much has been lost, in that process. And it's sad because sometimes the filmmaker doesn't get it, and they just seeing it so differently.
So Sid, how do you, in that case, ensure that the author kind of finds the right match with a director who matches the sensibility, the aesthetic, basically speaks the visual language?
So can I say, yeah, so let me tell you, I say no 500 times before I say yes.
Yeah.
I really, at the storying, that's why I never say we are an agency. I don't represent authors. I don't represent anybody. I am a story company. My job is to find the right filmmaker for the right story. And I think that is the only process where one can at least have a better chance of, maybe finding a good screen partner for a book. That's the only way. Because if it's like a commodity, I don't have a catalog. I don't have a list. It's specific. If Dharma will reach out to me for something that I'm looking for this, I will take probably 6 months to find that one story for them. You know, Bhansali reached out to me last year, said, Sid, is there something for me? You know, I had a comic book graphic novel which was published in America, which I had for 1 year, and I did not pitch it to anybody. I told him, yes, you know, I've got this for you only. And I was waiting for you to call me. And I shared it with him. He loved it and he took the rights. So I think we have to get over this whole literary agency business. We have to get over this representation business. You know, the agencies have to be on the side. We have to look at material like projects, like talent. Which talent is right? Like, for example, just today, you know, I posted on Facebook about a book. I fell in love with that book 7 years ago. I told the author that I love this book, but it's too early in India. We cannot do this. You know, we got offers. Every year we get 2 offers. I and the author have been saying no, 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 no. This weekend we signed a deal with a production house in Hollywood for the adaptation of that book because we found the right producer, the right creative executive in that studio who got exactly what the book is. And he insisted he wants the author to write the Bible and maybe be part of the screenplay process. So I think that patience if somebody has, you know, we can do this, but then we can't treat it like a commodity. We can't treat it like a catalog, right? So that's the big difference.
I like that attitude. That's a good attitude. I really think that I totally agree with that approach. I think it's about finding the right creative partners, you know, who will be part of the collaboration that you can trust. And that goes across the board, you know, like if you think about when you're building a film, you know, you're thinking about the cinematography, you're thinking about the sound, you're thinking about the writing, and you're thinking about the people who, when they're sitting together, are going to feed off each other and understand the zeitgeist of where that's going and the emotion of it. And spending as much time on building that and not seeing these as commodities is vital, which takes you back to what Anuja was saying. But there is another point here, which is that we live by our creativity, we live by our wit, you know, and like there's no other income. So you're here to find the way to bridge the gap between getting people to write the checks, getting people to sign the contracts, and preserving some important sense of politics, some important sense of creativity, and so it's binding those elements together in the way that it always was. But now there are more opportunities. You know, it is a career, and so it has to pay as well.
Anuja, what would you say? Like, you know, your lessons have been with your experience of a Zoya factor. What is it that you want to definitely avoid going forward? That's a massive red flag right when the process of the adaptation begins.
No, again, like, you know, I'm talking about, so Zoya is my first book and Battle for Bitora is my second book. And both those contracts, I wasn't really looking at them too hard legally, you know, the legal contracts that I signed then at that point. So those first 2 novels, it was very dhila, that part. It wasn't a tight contract. I didn't specify many things. And therefore I lost control on who got them, and you know, they could be resold to somebody else and so on, and the casting decisions and all that kind of a thing. After that, for my third novel, I got smarter, which is why now Pricey Thakur Girls was made once by Z, but now it has been resold and it's being made by Hotstar again. And this time, I mean, I'm happier. I have my fingers crossed. We have a very good director who seems to know what he's doing, and you know, so that's a nice thing to happen. And so I think one thing, like writers legally, we are very chindi, like we act like really, you know, we'll skimp on legal fees and stuff like that. So don't do that. You need to educate yourself, you need to understand the Copyrights Act, you need to have a lawyer even in your publishing contract and with your contract with whoever is optioning your film. Please understand that and put aside a little money and say, this is for my lawyer, and I will consult him or her and get that bit done. It's very important. So I would really emphasize that on all young writers who are going out there, you know, so that's a big learning for sure.
Also, like, I want to also ask you this, Anuja, that do you also somewhere feel that, you know, Bollywood traditionally, and which seems to be like the model that even the streaming companies are replicating to a large extent, has always been star driven and not plot or story driven, and at times, like, stories are written to service the image of the stars. Do you feel that happens sometimes if you have like...
Yeah, no, look, there are pros and cons to that. you know. So I mean, of course the cons are very clear, but the pros of that is, for example, like I've been reached out to by actors I really respect, you know, people whose work I really love, and these girls will phone me and say, give me this book, yeah, and I'm like, I'm sorry, I've given it to so and so. How could you give it to her? Because I do know that if so and so actress gets hold of so and so book and she is personally involved, and then because they have so much power, they will push all the buttons and make something amazing happen. And usually if you see really, you know, it is because some star type of person has given their time and has made sure, has sort of like mentored that whole process. So that, I guess, is the good part of having the star system. The bad part, of course, is that people will take your script and, you know, twist it and turn it and do horrible things to it, and so that a certain star can fit into it.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So it works both ways. So there is that. And Bollywood is a very scared medium, and it's very dumb. They're very frightened about, you know, and it's fair enough, because there's so much money involved and there's so much politics, and people will take your movie off the screen because you said, you know, we know all that stuff.
Yeah.
Whereas with books, you can be much braver, because it's such a small fraction of people who read novels in India. Who read novels in English is even more minuscule. So you can get away with a lot. You know, like Muhammad Hanif said this about Case of Exploding Mangoes. He said, nothing happened to me in Pakistan because nobody reads in English. I can happily write it. There's no issue. But the thing is, once it's trying to cross over into something as large as cinema, they'll just chop out all the juicy bits, you know.
Right.
So, yeah, there's that as well. So you have to be very cunning about hiding your juicy bits and camouflaging them and doing all that kind of thing.
It sounds like just walking on emotional eggshells, and then there is a miracle that happens if you do it right. And one would want that, you know, the streaming platforms are countering whatever we saw traditionally happen on TV.
But now streaming platforms are all going to come under the, you know, the eye of Sauron has turned on streaming platforms in a big way. So,
guys, this has been a fantastic session. I think we could go on and on for the rest of the evening. But before I let everyone go, I want to hear one book which was adapted into a movie or a TV series that you think was better than the book or did justice to the source material.
Whoa, tough.
Oh, I'll go first. I think it would have to be, this might be a bit controversial, The English Patient.
Oh, that was a lovely movie. Yeah, that was a great movie. I haven't revisited the book. Adrian?
Yeah, I'm struggling with that because I've not yet seen. The books have always been better. I like stuff that's conceived. Yeah, I'm struggling. The Sally Rooney thing at the moment, I'm loving. I'm just loving it. I really love the emotions. I love the sexuality. I love the cinematography. I think the Sally Rooney thing is the thing that's thrilled me. Yeah, it's thrilled me the most. Best performances. It feels so honest and heart aching. So maybe I'm going to go for Sally Rooney.
Anuja?
I'm trying really hard. I can give you like dozens of names of books that I'm disappointed by.
I thought of one as well.
Yeah, like Where Do You Go, Bernadette really broke my heart because I loved that book. Where Do You Go, Bernadette?
Right.
They made it into a movie with Kate Blanchett, and I actually was really hopeful for it. But they did something strange to the plot, which broke my heart. I'm very optimistic and excited about A Suitable Boy. Can I just say?
Yeah, I was just gonna mention.
Hasn't come out yet, but I'm hoping it's good. I'm really hoping.
But the skills that have come, like really.
Yes.
They've invested in that old building.
Yeah. So I'm hoping that one. So I'm quite excited about that, and I will watch.
Yeah, it'll be out in a few months. Sid?
Well, keeping in mind the process that, you know, that's part of the process which I'm aware of.
Hiding behind that process all the time. Now you have to give an honest answer. We all know.
So I quite liked the first few seasons of Game of Thrones, for sure. And even The Fault in Our Stars, I thought was a very good sort of film made from the book.
Yeah.
And I quite enjoyed those two.
There is a Bollywood adaptation coming of Fault in Our Stars, which I'm very worried about.
Yeah, that I'm really worried about. I don't want to see that one.
I quite like Lord of the Rings, actually. I wasn't behind the Gollum. I thought Gollum was all wrong, but I thought Lord of the Rings was decent.
Yeah.
Season 1, Handmaid's Tale. Handmaid's Tale. I thought season 1 was great.
Actually didn't see that.
I quite like Sharp Objects. I think the show is terrific.
Terrific.
I don't know if I've seen it. It's an
Terrific.
show, but it's so close to the book. So cool. Thank you everybody for joining us. And
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please like, subscribe to Roli Books on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. This should be out soon. And good luck everybody with the writing and the hustling.